someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said to them, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God."
Well, we are starting a new, just a little series of 3 weeks thinking about some big questions that people sometimes have. In fact, questions that came out of a survey that was done asking people what are some of the biggest questions in life. And here's this question: what are we designed for, is what we're thinking about this week. Now, we're trying to answer these by looking at a section of the Bible and seeing how the Bible interacts with the question, or at least part of the question, and we'll be doing that this week, next week, and the week after. So this is great for all of us. I think it's always good to see what the Bible says about something, but it's perhaps particularly useful if you're quite new to Christian things, or you're just thinking through Christian things. It might be useful, I hope, but I hope for all of us. So, well, let's have a think about this. What are we designed for? Or another way of saying something similar would be, how do I find purpose in life? What's my purpose in life? Or how do I know what I'm here for? Life often follows a sort of I can't say that word, trajectory. There's kind of a route in life, isn't it? We have to work hard at school. Most of us worked hard at school. Maybe some of us just had a lark about it. Most of us work hard at school because it is drummed into us, isn't it? You must do well in your exams. Many times in school they say, "Oh, you know, you thought it was hard last year, but now this year really you need to work hard because now this is the really important year." And they keep telling you that. But so we work hard at school because we want to do well in our exams. We might go on to some sort of education beyond school, but then we want to get a good job, don't we? We want to be set up in life so that we can sort of settle down. Perhaps we think kids might be the future. Eventually retirement. Is that it? Is that it? It's kind of, I follow this kind of arc in life. Lots of us are busy earning money that flows into our bank accounts and then just seems as quickly to flow out, doesn't it? We're scurrying around trying to make ends meet. But maybe sometimes think, what is the point? Or maybe we don't really think that because we don't really have a lot of time to sit and ponder. These days, if you're my age, these days things are very different to when we were younger, because when I was young, sometimes if you were meeting up with someone, meeting a friend or something, and they hadn't turned up yet, you just had to sort of wait and watch what was going on around and think and stuff. But now, of course, you whip out your phone, don't you? And you don't have to think. So maybe we think, what is the point? But maybe we're so busy and filling our minds with stuff that we don't really think. We have already thought in one of our songs about King Solomon this morning. That's somebody who lived 3,000 years ago, famously wise, and that song that we were singing reminds us of that. And he wrote a book where he said he'd studied life, he'd studied what was going on. He looked at people's lives, and he came to the conclusion it all seems meaningless. It all seems meaningless. People are busying themselves, all kinds of stuff. But really, where's the meaning in it all? Is it just meaningless? So, where do we find answers to this sort of question? Well, there are answers out there that you would hear. Some people's idea about this is you're asking the wrong question. If you think about what's my ultimate meaning, well, there isn't really one. Don't bother yourself with this sort of question. You don't really need to ask. Just, crack on with things. Just live for now. Don't have any regrets. Don't have any anxiety. Regrets are really when you're looking back. Anxiety is about things to come. If you just live for now, you don't need any regrets or anxiety. Just live for now. Well, that's one approach. You might know people who are following that approach. Maybe a more common answer is find your own answer to this question. What we're designed for? What's my purpose? What am I here for? Well, what works for you? Find your own purpose. Discover who you are. Discover what you can contribute. Often it's stressed that you mustn't copy other people's dream. You must follow your own dream. Don't let anyone else tell you what you ought to do. There is some wisdom in that, isn't there? People would say, follow your heart, which really is another way of saying look within to find the answer. What excites you? What are you passionate about? Pursue that. That was certainly the advice the careers person at school gave me when I was 15. What are we designed for? Well, you decide, you do you. Find your own meaning. Well, there's a few ideas about this question, but we're going to look this morning at what does the Bible say, and specifically, what does Jesus Christ say about this? And to do this, we're looking at this incident from Luke 12. It was on page... I've got the wrong page here, sorry. It was on page 1132, and you might find that useful to have that open in front of you. I will be referring to some of those verses there. What does the Bible say, or what does Jesus say here? I'm going to do this by looking at two things I think we can learn from this, and they're on the screen for us. The first is Jesus wants us to notice that you've got to be careful how you decide what you're designed for. You're be careful as you think about this. And secondly, failure is being successful at things that don't matter. Failure is being successful at things that don't matter. So let's think about this first thing. Be careful how you decide what you're designed for. Now, our little section here opened with a man who wanted Jesus to be a judge. A judge in a family dispute over a will, it seems to be. He's saying, my brother's not sharing the inheritance with me. Can you intervene? Now, this would be a sort of common thing back then that you might get a religious teacher or a rabbi, some wise person to adjudicate on something like this. But Jesus, in verse 14, we discover that Jesus shows no interest in getting involved in this dispute. But he does seem to spot something that is behind the question, because he's saying, I'm not going to be an arbiter or a judge in verse 14. But in verse 15, he said, watch out, be on your guard, against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Be on your guard. Be wary. In fact, watch out. Watch out. What for? For all kinds of greed. Not one kind of greed. All kinds of greed. So not just a chocolate cake-based greed, which I think probably quite a lot of us here have, but all kinds of greed. There's all kinds of ways we can be greedy. And then just to help us see that, life is not about accumulating stuff. It's not about accumulating stuff. We can be greedy about accumulating all kinds of things, all kinds of little trophies that we are proud of. Jesus doesn't say, if that's how you find meaning, well, good for you. Good for you. Whatever floats your boat, you do you. He doesn't say that. And to really get this point across, he tells this warning story, this parable. Jesus often uses stories that have a point, and here it's a story that carries a warning. And it's quite a simple story to understand, I think, but it really sticks in your head, I think, because it has quite a poignancy to it. It's a simple start. We've got this farmer. He's already quite rich, but he has this bumper crop. I mean, he's really doing well, and he has no room to store it all. That's in verse 16. Verse 17, what shall I do? Got no place to store my crop. It's the sort of thing that dreams are made of, isn't it? It's like, I've invested in some way, I've put some effort in here, I've done something, and it's really paid off. It's really paid off. You know, it's like I bought shares in Google before anyone else or something, and now it's worth a fortune or something. I don't know. I've put something in, and it's really paid off. And his solution is, in verse 18, I'm going to knock down my barns, I'm going to build some bigger ones. And the world would say, smart solution, obvious solution maybe. You know, get it all stored away. Brilliant. And in verse 19, he's having this sort of conversation with himself. I'll say to myself, he says, in verse 19, live in plenty. Got extra? Wise planning? Lay it all up for years to come. Now, I'm at an age, I'm approaching 60. I'm at an age where when I'm online, I get shown all these adverts about retirement plan, particularly retirement planning. Things like how to retire 5 years earlier than you thought you could, and how much do I really need to retire, and things like this. I'm being shown things like this all the time because I presume because of how old I am, and that is a common thing that people approaching 60 are maybe thinking about. And this guy, he's thinking about this. He's good at thinking about himself and looking after himself. Because in verses 17, 18 and 19, 11 times, he either says I, me, or my. He's very good about thinking about himself and his plans. Over and over again, in 17, 18, 19, he's thinking about his plans. But then in verse 20 comes that significant shift in the story. God says to him, you fool, you fool. And none of us like to be thought of as foolish. But God saying that to you? I mean, that is devastating, isn't it? You fool. You've spent your whole life preparing for a retirement that you will not get to enjoy. And that turns out was foolish. You idiot. But it turns out he's not alone. It turns out it's a common mistake. And why do we know that? Because Jesus says, verse 21, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves. Others are doing it. Could be me. Could be you. Jesus isn't just challenging the guy who came wanting to speak to his brother about the inheritance. Jesus is speaking to us, echoing down across the years. So Jesus says, be careful how you decide what you're designed for. Be careful what you think your purpose is and what you're going to give your life to, because you could get it wrong. You could end up wasting your life chasing the wrong thing, or a thing that is of no ultimate value. And that brings us to the second thing I want us to think about, which is that failure is being successful at things that don't matter. Failure is being successful at things that don't matter. In our garden, we had this kind of plastic box thing for storing stuff in. So I used to keep gardening equipment in there, my little trowel, my thick gardening gloves that don't always protect from all the thorns, but thick gardening gloves. And various other things that I'll keep in there. I have some stuff, some barbecue coal that I don't want in the house. It's in there. It was great, little plastic box, kept it outside, kept it dry, it was great. Until one of my children used it as a trampoline. And then it got some cracks in the lid, and then it became worse than useless, because not only did then the water get in, and I got out my thick gardening gloves covered in mould, but it would let water in, but because it's this big plastic box, then the water couldn't get out. So then everything was just gross. And I picked up a bag of charcoal, and the bottom just fell out of it, and all the charcoal just went all over everything. It's just gross. I've had to replace it. I've had to get a new plastic box because I just couldn't keep the water out of the other one. But when the new one came, I noticed it had some instructions about the amount of weight you could put on the lid. There were instructions from the people who'd made it. It didn't actually say don't use it as a trampoline, but that was the implication because of how much weight you can put on there. Somebody who's made something is able to give instructions about it, aren't they? In fact, a maker kind of gives purpose and meaning to the thing they've made, or they've made it for a purpose and a meaning. They're able to say how to use something. Did you notice what God said in verse 20 in Jesus' story? God said, "And you fool, this very night your life, which I have given to you, will be demanded back from you." Doesn't quite have added in there, but that's basically what he said. This very night, actually tonight, within hours, your life will be demanded of you. A reminder, some things are totally out of our hands, aren't they? In fact, I was just speaking to somebody just before this meeting this morning, and we were just commenting that in the blink of an eye, your life can totally change. An accident can happen, something that's totally outside of your control can happen, and you can find yourself in hospital in Newcastle. This very night, God says, your life's going to change. In fact, it's going to end. It's out of our hands. It's actually, the Bible would say, it's in our Maker's hands. And in a sense, even his wealth was given. Look at verse 16. He tells them the parable. The ground of a certain man yielded an abundant harvest. Now, no doubt the farmer has to do some work, but where has the abundant harvest come from? It's come from the ground, hasn't it? The ground has yielded the harvest. God even has control over that, doesn't he? So what should he have done? What should he have done, this farmer? Well, the answer came in the last 3 words of the section that we read. Do you see the last 3 words? He was not rich towards God. That's what he should have been. He should have been rich towards God. Or generous towards God, we might say. I've said that failure is being successful at things that don't matter. He should have been rich towards God, his maker. I was just thinking about verse 21, and I was thinking about the school assembly version of verse 21. I think it would go like this. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards other people. He's not rich towards other people. You've got to think about others. That's not wrong, is it? That's true. But that's not what Jesus says, is it? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. So it's true we want to be rich towards others. We don't want to be self-centered. We want to think about other people. But Jesus takes us further, gets us to look higher. Jesus said more about this in Matthew 22, and I've got it on the screen for us. Thanks, Ruben. In Matthew 22, Jesus said this. Somebody asked him a question, which is the greatest command? You might know this answer. Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is a bit like it. Love your neighbour as yourself. So there's the others, but that's the second, says Jesus. The first one, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. That's another way of saying be rich towards God, isn't it? But I mean, that is amazingly comprehensive, isn't it? Heart, soul, mind, love with all. And the Bible would say that is how we live as we're designed to be. To live for your Maker, God. Now somebody might say to me, yeah, but which God? Which God? There are lots of ideas of God out there, aren't they? Be rich towards God. But what do you mean? Well, Jesus had something to say about this in John 14, which is also on the screen for us. Jesus says, one of his more famous sayings, he said, I am the way, the truth and the life. The way to what? Well, the way to God the Father. No one comes to the Father except through me. So Jesus says, I am the truth. Lots of ideas out there, but he said, I am the truth. I'm the way to life. I'm the way to God. So how do we know God? How can we be rich towards God? Well, Jesus says, come to Jesus. Come to Jesus. Now that is a big claim, isn't it? That is a big claim. And the way, the truth, the life is a massive claim. We're thinking about how to know, how to find direction and meaning in your life, how to kind of unlock that. Jesus says, come to me. We might think, but can I trust him? Can I trust Jesus? Is he for me? Is he on my side? Well, let's just look at Philippians chapter 2, which is again on the screen for us. Where Paul, writing about Jesus, says this of Jesus. He said he was in his very nature God, but he didn't consider equality with God something to be used for his own advantage. Rather, Jesus made himself nothing, took on the very nature of a servant, and being made in human likeness, being found in appearance as man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. What's he saying? He's saying, yes, Jesus is for you. Yes, he's all in his love for you. And the proof of that is that he came and died on a cross for people like you and me. So we're left with a choice from all this. Do I believe it? Do I believe it? Do I believe this? Do I believe what Jesus is saying in this story? Now, you shouldn't believe it because I've said it, but I think you should believe it because Jesus is saying it. But we are faced with that question. Do I believe it, or do I choose my own purpose in life? Could be a way that seems right. But Jesus is saying you might end up in the end with God saying to you, verse 20, you fool, you fool. Didn't you realise that failure is being successful at things that don't matter? Well, as ever, Jesus gives us lots to think about there, doesn't he? I'm just going to pause for us just to think about what this means for us, and then in a moment I'm going to pray. Let's just pause for a minute. Father, none of us want to be a fool. None of us want to be hoodwinked or conned. Father, I pray that you'd help us to understand what Jesus is saying here. That you'd help us to know what he's claiming and the truth of his claims. Father, maybe we need more info. We need to look into these things a bit more. I pray you'd help us to do that. Maybe these things are not new ideas for us, but a helpful reminder. Father, I pray that you'd help all of us to be rich towards God. Amen.
Amen.